Love never cares if you show up late to the game. The real tragedy is when your heart skips a beat, but you talk yourself out of it just because she's your best friend's little sister. I had locked myself in my Chicago apartment to finish a manuscript, desperate for even a spark of inspiration, and I was right in the middle of a frustrating romantic scene, ready to smash my keyboard when the doorbell rang. I swung the door open to find Sarah Harrison, my best friend's sister, standing in the hallway. Her usually icy eyes were soft with a hint of a smile as she looked up at me and whispered a soft good evening. Hearing her call out to me, like that, sent a genuine shiver down my spine. This girl was usually the ice queen type, acting like everyone was beneath her. I wondered if she had lost her mind, but then I caught the scent of alcohol and realized she was wasted. I frowned at her and asked her why she was drinking at her age. "Morrison, I'm 20 years old," she answered obediently, her voice sounding so soft and sweet that it could melt a stone. I sighed and told her to get inside, leading her into the apartment like a clumsy, oversized puppy. I told her to sit on the couch while I went to the kitchen to make her some honey water to help her sober up. She just nodded and watched me with those big, dewy eyes of hers. When I finally returned with the drink, I nearly dropped the glass because she was in the middle of stripping. I stood there frozen, unable to look away as she revealed her slender waist. I tried to tell myself not to be a creep, but my eyes were glued to her. I never realized that despite her thin frame, she actually had an incredible figure. She started reaching for the zipper on her jeans, and the sound finally snapped me out of my trance. I lunged forward and grabbed her hands, telling her to stop right there. Sarah looked at me with flushed cheeks and a pitiful expression, whimpering that she was freezing. I wanted to ask her why she was undressing if she was cold, especially since I was the one starting to feel the heat. I took a deep breath and tried to be the responsible adult, telling her that as her brother's best friend, she needed to listen to me. I lectured her about the dangers of drinking and told her she needed to be more careful. She looked up at me and pointed out that she wasn't currently outside. She was with me. She grabbed my hand and leaned her head against my chest, asking me if I liked her back. I stood there, completely speechless and unsure of what to say. I took a long, slow breath and told her that of course I liked her, but just not in a romantic way. I tried to explain that since she grew up with me, she was basically like a sister. She immediately bristled at that, telling me she had no interest in being my sister and that I should stop trying to put her in a box. I tried to get her to put her clothes back on, but she was relentless, her gaze hazy but determined as she demanded an answer. Before I could get another word out, she leaned in and pressed her lips against mine. My brain felt like it was about to explode from the sudden contact. Just as I was about to lose all my resolve and give in, a terrifying thought hit me. This was Logan's little sister, and she was 3 years younger than me. I wondered where I would ever find the nerve to touch her, knowing Logan would probably hunt me down and kill me if he found out. I pulled away from her, and she just looked at me with a confused, innocent expression. She took my hand and pressed it against her chest, telling me to feel how fast her heart was beating. She whispered that I was the only reason it was racing like that. Honestly, if anyone else had used such a cheesy line, I would have died of embarrassment right there. But coming from Sarah, it actually felt incredibly sincere and moving. Then she looked me in the eyes and asked if I would finally be her boyfriend. I stood there in shock, thinking that if we were the same age and she wasn't Logan's sister, I might actually say yes. But she was still in college, and she was the only sister of my best friend. Even if I had all the guts in the world, I knew I shouldn't be making a move on someone so close to home. I remembered the first time I saw her at the University of Chicago when I went with Logan to drop off some stuff. She was out on a basketball court, and when she ran over to us, she was covered in sweat with her hair sticking to her forehead. Even then, her eyes were so bright and full of life that she reminded me of a fresh spring morning. I forced myself to be cruel and told her that she was great, but I just didn't have feelings for her. A look of pure disappointment crossed her face, but she didn't back down. She asked me why. If I didn't like her, I had used her as the inspiration for the main character in my newest book. I finally understood the meaning of true social death. She seemed to sober up a little as she began to recite lines from my manuscript in a soft, mocking tone. She quoted the descriptions I'd written about her height and her hatred for cilantro, proving she knew exactly who I was writing about. I begged her to stop, feeling my face burning with shame. She just leaned in and pointed out that I knew every little detail about her, from her favorite foods to the way she spoke. She challenged me to look her in the eye and tell her I wasn't interested after all that. She kept moving closer until I could feel her warm breath on my skin. I tried to make the excuse that it was just for research, but she just laughed at me. She told me I was a terrible liar if I still tried to claim I didn't have feelings for her. While I was struggling to find a response, she leaned in and gave me a quick, soft kiss on the lips. She told me she wouldn't pressure me and that I should just think about it. Then she stood up and headed for the bathroom, casually asking if I had a spare towel she could use. I tried to clear my head and brought a towel to the bathroom door. She was still only half dressed when she took it from me, offering a quiet thanks. When she finally emerged after her shower, she was wearing one of my oversized t-shirts, looking like she was walking a high-fashion runway in my living room. A thunderstorm started outside, so I told her she should just stay the night and that I would go get the guest room ready. As I walked past her, she grabbed my hand and reminded me of how much I hated thunder. She suggested, with a playful glint in her eye, that she should stay with me so I wouldn't be scared. I couldn't handle that kind of pressure, so I practically ran to my bedroom and didn't sleep a wink all night. The next morning, a knock on my door made me snap at whoever was being so loud. Everything went quiet until I heard Sarah's soft voice telling me she was heading to class and that she'd left breakfast for me. I opened the door just as she was about to leave, and she looked back at me with a questioning gaze. I had been hearing her voice in my head all night, and seeing her now was making me lose my mind. I struggled to keep my composure as I looked at her. I asked if she was heading to campus and offered to drive her since it was a long commute. I was just trying to be polite and fully expected her to say no, but she just gave me a bright smile and accepted the offer immediately. I felt like an idiot for offering, but I had to follow through. I threw on some gym clothes and tried to make myself look presentable before we headed to the car. The drive was filled with awkward small talk about her classes and professors, with her giving me mostly one-word answers. Her face finally lit up when we started talking about the campus dining halls, and she insisted that I stay for lunch. I figured she was still just a kid at heart who loved a good meal, so I agreed to go. She caught my eye then, and the intensity of her gaze made my heart skip a beat, forcing me to look away. I asked her if she was a junior now and if she had finally found a boyfriend. When she said no, I tried to play it cool by saying that college was the best time for romance and that there must be plenty of people interested in her. She just stayed silent, looking annoyed by my suggestion. The atmosphere in the car turned icy, and I realized I had struck a nerve again. While we were stopped at a light, she suddenly asked me if I was really that eager to see her dating someone else. I didn't know how to answer that without making things worse. I tried to explain that I just wanted her to enjoy her youth while she could. She shot back with a sarcastic comment about whether I wanted her to be just like me. I immediately changed the subject, regretting the fact that I had ever offered to drive her in the first place. When we finally reached the gates of the University of Chicago, I made up an excuse about my editor needing immediate revisions. I told her I was sorry to miss lunch, hoping she would just take the hint and let me go. I gave her my best apologetic look. She agreed and thanked me for the ride, promising to treat me to dinner another time. I thought I was in the clear until one of her classmates walked up and asked who the handsome guy in the car was. She pointed out that Sarah hadn't made it back to the dorms the previous night. Before I could even open my mouth, Sarah gave me a sweet smile and introduced me as her boyfriend. Her friend looked absolutely stunned. Sarah then looked at me and told me to head home, saying she'd see me for dinner later, before giving my hair a playful ruffle and hopping out of the car. I sat there in a daze, wondering what the hell she was thinking by telling people we were together. When I got home, I opened up my latest project and realized that I had written so much of her into the story that it was undeniable. I deleted the file in a fit of rage, but it was useless since the book was already being sold nationwide. My doorbell rang later that afternoon, and it was Logan. He stepped inside and immediately started sniffing the air, asking if I was hiding a girl in there. I told him he wasn't a bloodhound, but he just smirked and started sniffing the throw pillows on my couch, claiming the scent was strongest right there. I started breaking into a cold sweat, worried he was going to figure everything out. He gave me a strange look before reminding me that it was Sarah's birthday coming up and that I needed to be there. Just hearing her name made my heart race, but I forced myself to agree to come. I made a point of being the last one to arrive at the party, planning to make a quick exit as soon as dinner was over. However, when I walked in, everyone was already seated in the living room. Sarah was dressed in a sharp black suit with her hair slicked back, looking so stunning that I literally couldn't look away. She kept her eyes locked on mine as Logan jokingly scolded me for being an hour late. Mrs. Harrison eventually announced that dinner was served. The Harrisons were one of the most prominent families in Chicago, and I knew for a fact that she didn't think I was good enough for them. During dinner, Mrs. Harrison made sure a girl named Nina sat right next to Sarah. Nina was being overly sweet, and I just kept my head down, focusing on my napkin. Logan leaned in and whispered that his mom was trying to set Sarah up with the heir to the Sterling fortune, though he personally thought the guy was a total tool. After the meal, Mrs. Harrison suggested that Sarah take Nina for a walk through the gardens, but Sarah flatly refused. She gave me a look that made my stomach flip and claimed she had other plans for a birthday party with her friends. Nina just shrugged and said she didn't mind exploring on her own. I was heading out to grab some dinner when Sarah suddenly hopped into my passenger seat. When I asked about her party plans, she just told me she'd had a drink and needed me to drive her. I saw Nina heading our way, so I didn't wait around and floored it out of the driveway. She laughed and asked if it felt like we were eloping together. She followed me into the restaurant, admitting that she'd lied about the other party just to get away. After we finished eating, the weather turned terrible again, and she looked me in the eyes to tell me she wasn't interested in anyone but me. Before I could respond, she stepped out into the downpour. I called out for her to wait, seeing how miserable she looked in the rain. I finally gave in and told her she could stay in my place. We stopped at a 24-hour store to pick up some essentials for her, and I felt like a total creep as the clerk watched me buy women's underwear. As we stepped out of the elevator, we saw someone waiting outside my apartment door. Sarah immediately stepped in front of me, acting protectively as the person stood up and called my name. It was Shannon, my first love, and hearing her voice after all this time felt like a punch to the gut. We had been inseparable since we were kids, always teetering on the edge of something more than friendship. I had been too afraid to tell her how I felt, worried I'd lose her forever. Then I found out she was secretly dating some guy from the local arts college, and I realized I just wasn't the guy she wanted. She had moved away for years and was now back in town with a successful career. She looked completely different now, much more sophisticated and confident. When she tried to greet me, I cut her off and asked how the hell she'd found out where I lived, and she admitted she'd gotten the address from Logan. I could practically hear Sarah grinding her teeth as she stood next to me. When Shannon asked if we could talk, Sarah stepped in and told her that I was soaked and needed to get inside before I got sick. She practically dragged me into the apartment and slammed the door shut before Shannon could say another word. My legs felt like jelly as soon as we were inside, and Sarah caught me before I could fall. She watched me with an intense, burning gaze before heading off to take a shower. I checked my phone to find a text from Shannon asking for a second chance, but I just told her that I was already seeing someone. By the time Sarah came out of the bathroom, I was already half drunk. She took the bottle away from me, and I just slumped against her, telling her she should have a drink with me. She guided me to the couch and asked if I was upset because of the woman waiting outside. I ranted about how much of an idiot I'd been for pining over Shannon for all those years while she was out dating other guys. I complained that I'd wasted my entire youth without ever having a real relationship. Sarah just held me while I vented, and once I was done, she kissed me and told me it wasn't too late to start over. I woke up the next morning feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. I felt the blankets move and saw Sarah sitting up next to me, her hair a total mess. I panicked for a second until I realized she was wearing a camisole, but then I noticed the marks on her skin and started to freak out. She asked me what was wrong, and I told her that Logan was definitely going to murder me. I was having a total crisis about what we'd done, but Sarah just stayed calm. She told me not to worry because we'd both wanted this, and she was willing to take full responsibility for our relationship. My editor called to remind me about a book signing, and Sarah offered to drive me since I was still recovering from the night before. I made some stupid comment about how she must be tired too, and the awkward silence that followed made me want to crawl into a hole. I quickly retreated to my room to get ready. During the drive, I tried to tell her that last night was just a mistake and she didn't owe me anything. She looked at me at a red light and pointed out that she hadn't been drunk at all and that it was her first time. She told me that if I wasn't going to step up, she would be the one to take care of me instead. Once the event was over, I avoided her calls and basically ran away to a resort outside the city. I spent a week trying to clear my head, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. She hadn't messaged me since that first day, and I started to think she'd already moved on to someone else. I was muttering to myself about how she'd lied to me when I heard a familiar voice behind me. I looked up to see Sarah standing there, looking like an absolute vision in a black coat and white sweater. She looked so beautiful in the sunlight that I almost forgot I was supposed to be mad at her. I asked her how she'd found me, and she just gave me a knowing smirk. She caught sight of my laptop screen, where I'd literally been typing about how much I missed her, and her face lit up. She told me she missed me just as much and asked if we could finally make our relationship official. I muttered that her family would never go for it, but she just told me she didn't need their permission. She then surprised me by saying that Logan already knew about us. I was terrified for a second until she told me he was actually okay with the whole thing. Logan suddenly appeared, yelling about how I'd made a move on his little sister. I braced myself for a punch, but instead, he just gave me a friendly shove and a wink. He actually called me his brother-in-law and told me he was glad she'd chosen someone he actually liked. Later that night, Logan pulled a prank on me and stole my clothes while I was in the hot spring. I had to call Sarah to come help me out, and she showed up with a blanket and some spare clothes. She was a total gentleman and turned around while I got dressed. Then she wrapped me up and held my hands in her pockets to keep me warm. Logan had apparently booked every single room in the hotel under the Harrison name, so I was forced to share a suite with Sarah. She insisted on taking the couch so I could have the bed, but I was worried about her being cold. I eventually snuck over to check on her, watching her sleep in the moonlight. Her eyes fluttered open and she caught me staring, asking what I was doing. I made up a ridiculous story about a mosquito, and she just laughed because it was the middle of winter. When I tried to get up, she grabbed my arm and pulled me down right on top of her. She held me close and teased me about whether I was just worried she was cold. I asked her why she was so different now compared to her usual icy personality, and she told me I was the only person who could get her to open up. She confessed she'd liked me since the day I got lost on her campus and walked in circles for 10 minutes. I was so embarrassed that she'd see me like that, but she just laughed and promised to always guide me from now on. She even joked about keeping me warm in bed as well. We decided to keep our relationship a secret for a while, just to avoid any family drama. We spent every night on FaceTime together, and one time I accidentally buttoned my shirt wrong after a shower. She was blushing the entire time, and when I asked her why, she finally told me I was half exposed. I was mortified, but she just laughed and reminded me that she'd already seen everything. She came over one weekend to watch horror movies, and I ended up hiding in her arms for most of the night. She teased me for being a coward while I accidentally bruised her arm from gripping it so hard. She made me compensate her for the injury with lots of kisses. Things were getting serious between us, but she always made sure to respect my boundaries. She turned out to be an amazing cook, and Logan eventually told me she'd started learning after seeing how terrible I was at it. Apparently, my burnt birthday chicken was the catalyst for her becoming a chef. Unfortunately, Nina caught us out on a date and told Mrs. Harrison everything. She called me in for a meeting and made it clear that while she liked me as Logan's friend, she didn't think I was marriage material for their family. She told me that while dating was fine for now, I should never expect to join the Harrison family officially. Sarah came over that night and practically pinned me to the wall before dropping to one knee. She held out a beautiful diamond ring she'd bought with her own money and told me she didn't care what her mother said. She promised to always love and cherish me, regardless of our age difference, and asked me to be hers forever. I was crying and laughing at the same time as I told her to put the ring on my finger. She ended up having a huge blowout with her family, but Logan managed to convince their mother to accept us. He told her she could either gain a son-in-law or lose a daughter entirely, and she eventually caved because she mistakenly thought I was pregnant due to a stomach bug I'd had. 2 months later, I found out I actually was pregnant for real. Sarah was only 22 and just starting her life, but she was absolutely thrilled to be a father. Years later, we were sitting in a park with our twins when she kissed me and told me that she'd known from the very beginning that we were meant to be together. The person who is truly meant for you won't care about the age gap or the fact that you're older than her. All she will ever care about is whether you have the courage to take her hand and never let it go.